No surprise here, Donald Trump is immediately grifting off the United States Supreme Court's denial of Special Counsel Jack Smith's petition for certiorari on the issue of absolute presidential immunity grounds. But this grift is so utterly pathetic. Let me show you the email Donald Trump is grifting from his supporters off of, and then let me explain to you why Donald Trump not only has no clue what the underlying ruling actually means, but I'll also want to explain to you why this email is utterly going to backfire in Donald Trump's face, like his comments and statements and knee-jerk reactions to everything always does. Thankfully, Donald Trump's MAGA mentality involves both wannabe fascism plus idiocracy, and the idiocracy is very strong in this email. Donald Trump writes to his supporters, the subject line, "Justice delivered." And then he writes to the supporters, "Justice is a beautiful thing. The worst and most corrupt president in history was just denied," and he puts denied in caps, italicized, and underlined, "by the Supreme Court." And then he posts the Supreme Court's one-sentence denial on the petition for certiorari. And then it says, "The petition for a writ of certiorari before judgment is denied." And then Donald Trump tries to grift money from his supporters off of this email. What the Supreme Court is denying is hearing your appeal, Donald Trump. All Special Counsel Jack Smith was seeking by filing a petition for writ of certiorari there is that the denial of your motion to dismiss the indictment on absolute presidential immunity grounds by the district court judge be fast-tracked directly to the Supreme Court and not have to go through the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. You oppose that. So Donald Trump and Donald Trump's lawyers, who have been saying all along that they think they have a slam dunk defense on the issue of absolute presidential immunity in the Washington, D.C. federal criminal case for Trump's attempt to overthrow the results of the 2020 election, begged the Supreme Court in their response to Special Counsel Jack Smith's petition to the Supreme Court for the Supreme Court not to hear oral argument at this stage. Who in their right mind, when they think the Supreme Court would vindicate them, would say, no, actually, Supreme Court, let's wait this one out a little bit. Let's see what the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals panel does first, and then D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, after the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals rules, then United States Supreme Court, you could step in. You know who? Somebody who doesn't know the law, has the worst lawyers, and is simply using all of this for victimhood and in order to grift money from their supporters. That's who would engage in this. So what Donald Trump is simply bragging about right here is that the Supreme Court, for now, in a one-sentence order, is not going to be hearing Donald Trump's appeal through a direct process. Instead, it has to now go through the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, who set an expedited briefing schedule. Oral argument before the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals will take place on January 9th. Special Counsel Jack Smith's response or brief will be due December 30th. Donald Trump filed his brief December 23rd. So there's an expedited process going through the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Eventually, after the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals makes its ruling, which I expect to happen before February 1st, I expect it to happen sometime around January 20th, then there will then be another petition for certiorari before the Supreme Court, and then we'll see what the Supreme Court does then. And then I'm sure Donald Trump will be whining and complaining, "Oh, the Supreme Court doesn't like me. The Supreme Court did the wrong thing." The thing that Donald Trump is bragging about in this email that he's sending over the holidays, bragging that he thinks justice is the fact that it got delayed another few weeks before the Supreme Court will then get a full record after the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled, and then have the opportunity to decide whether or not it wants to hear this case. Like, what in the world are you even talking about here? But look, I'll show you Donald Trump's argument before the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, just so you see how bad and pathetic it is. Donald Trump argues that he has absolute immunity. This is what he filed on December 23rd. He goes, Donald Trump has absolute immunity from prosecution for his official acts as president. The indictment alleges only official acts, so it must be dismissed, Donald Trump says. So he says that Special Counsel Jack Smith's criminal indictment in Washington, D.C. federal court. Everything that Jack Smith says that Donald Trump did unlawfully and criminally, Donald Trump says those were official acts. That's what presidents are supposed to do. Because they're official acts, I have absolute king-like presidential immunity. Donald Trump isn't. For someone who's writing this email to his supporters to grift money and saying justice is a beautiful thing, Donald Trump isn't saying justice is a beautiful thing. I was vindicated because I didn't do what I'm being accused of. Nope. Donald Trump's argument is that I'm entitled to the immunity like a king. And all of the criminal acts that Special Counsel Jack Smith put in the indictment, those are the official acts. That's what the United States presidency is supposed to do. I mean, actually, it isn't. I mean, just setting aside the criminal conduct of trying to interfere with and overthrow the results of the 2020 election and switch Biden votes to Trump votes, which we hear on audio recordings to find you the votes, in addition to all of your other outlandish and despicable behavior across the country leading to the insurrection, and then even to this day, there is no Article 2 executive power over elections, period. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals made that actually very clear, and intentionally so, in the ruling they made last week denying Mark Meadows federal officer removal, saying, first off, you're a former federal official. You can't remove cases to federal court, Mark Meadows, as Meadows tried to move the Fulton County District Attorney RICO case to federal court. And then the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, a right-wing court, also said, what are you even talking about? This is not what the presidency is about. This is not what the executive branch even engages in. So for that separate and independent reason, you were not acting under color of law, Mark Meadows. And then the 11th Circuit swiftly disposed of Jeff Clark, the wannabe MAGA attorney general who tried to seize power in the Department of Justice when Jeff Clark tried to seek a stay recently before the 11th Circuit. They said, you see what we just ruled for Meadows? Get away, Jeff Clark. We're not granting you a stay here. You have no chance of succeeding on the merits on your appeal at all. So no, Donald Trump, this has nothing to do with actual executive authority. This has nothing to do with official acts. So the fact that you're bragging that the United States Supreme Court gave a temporary delay in your own appeal, you're bragging that you are preventing the, you've argued that the Supreme Court shouldn't vindicate you now, and that there'll be 3 or 4 more weeks where you'll lose before the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, and then the Supreme Court may or may not take it up. But here's the thing. Why is Donald Trump doing it? It's all a grift. It's not tethered to reality. It's not tethered to what the law is. It's how can he whine over and over and over again, oh, pity me, they're coming after me, they're coming after me. And if you just read this email, again, it's like Trump's referring to himself. The worst and most corrupt president in history was just denied by the Supreme Court. That's kind of talking about you. You are the worst and most corrupt president in history, and all you did was fight so that the Supreme Court could deny hearing the appeal right now, and that Supreme Court said, basically for now we're not hearing it, but we'll see what happens after the DC Circuit Court of Appeals rules. And by the way, I just started looking at other times that Donald Trump would just whine about the Supreme Court. This is when the the Dobbs decision leak, Donald Trump posted, the Supreme Court of the United States has the lowest approval rating in its long and storied history. No wonder there are leaks and they can't find the leaker. They are petrified of the radical left maniacs who are destroying our country, are unwilling to make bold, courageous, and proper decisions of rigged and stolen elections, and are always wanting to be politically correct instead of doing what is best for the USA. We need strength and wisdom now! Exclamation point. Here, Donald Trump responded to another ruling by the Supreme Court that was adverse to him a little bit ago. He said, in the Supreme Court, the President of the United States does not have standing over his own elections. How ridiculous. He attacked the Supreme Court there regarding his insurrection efforts. And here Donald Trump posts, why would anybody be surprised that the Supreme Court ruled against me? They always do. It is unprecedented to be handing over tax returns, and it creates a terrible precedent for future presidents. Has Joe Biden paid taxes on all of the money he made illegally from Hunter and beyond? The Supreme Court has lost its honor, prestige, and standing, and has become nothing more than a political body with our country paying the price. They refuse to even look at the election hoax of 2020. Shame on them. That's after the Supreme Court ruled that that Donald Trump's tax returns could be turned over to United States Congress. And President Biden turned over all of his tax returns, as every other president did before you, Donald Trump. And so you see that Donald Trump here, it's whatever the ruling is in a given day, I'll lash out against the Supreme Court. I'll say, okay, justice is a beautiful thing, because the Supreme Court did not take a direct appeal, which is the rarest of rare circumstances. And the reason, as I've said before, why they did that is because the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ordered expedited briefing on the issue of absolute presidential immunity anyway. So it'll be quick to go through the normal process of district court, court of appeals, and then up to the Supreme Court after the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals makes its ruling. It's just a constant whining, constant grift over and over and over again with this guy. I think that it just even rings more hollow at this point, that Donald Trump's behavior, it just doesn't hit the same way. It's just like, get this whiny person away from us. Like, get this whiny idiot away. I don't know. That's my view. Tell me what you think in the comments, but I wanted to share with you. The worst and most corrupt president in history was just denied by the Supreme Court. Yeah, you were just denied by the Supreme Court their ability right now to hear the direct appeal, your own direct appeal. Anyone else in the situation who doesn't want delay would say, yeah, why don't you hear my appeal? You think you have absolute presidential immunity? You should tell the Supreme Court you want to hear it now. You know you're a loser. That's why you want to delay it. And you're celebrating a temporary delay. Just shows what a loser you are. Who celebrates temporary delays on your own appeal? Hit subscribe. We're on our way to 2 million subscribers. Thanks to your support, and have a great day.
Thanks so much for watching. We're only a few subscribers short of 2 million subs. Please subscribe right now to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel for free and help us grow this unapologetically pro-democracy network.